He was the king of pop, whose sudden death stunned the world and launched a major murder investigation. Now, for the first time ever, TV Guide brings you a minute-by-minute account of superstar Michael Jackson's last days.
He was just in a great mood, and singing and dancing, and just had lots of energy.
We'll take you inside his final rehearsals that Tuesday and Wednesday.
Wednesday night at 12:30 a.m., he gave me a hug and whispered into my ear, "Now I know I can do this."
The last thing Michael Jackson said to me was, "I love you."
Get brand new details of the drama unfolding at his mansion that fateful Thursday.
He comes down the stairs and he starts screaming frantically. Me and the children are downstairs. Paris starts crying, "Daddy, Daddy."
Learn exactly what happened at the hospital as desperate doctors tried to save the superstar.
He wasn't wearing a shirt. He was barefoot, just in the trousers.
And see who surrounded the singer in those last hours and who may be in trouble.
It's hard to understand why Dr. Murray didn't call 911 right away.
He was absolutely glassy-eyed. He had no expression on his face. That was Dr. Murray.
Michael Jackson, his final days, next on TV Guide Network.
I said, you know, they're killing me.
On June 25th, the world lost one of the greatest entertainers of all time. Michael Jackson was dead at the age of 50. But what really happened in the days leading up to the singer's sudden death? I'm Veronica Dela Cruz. TV Guide Network investigates the real story with exclusive and candid interviews from those closest to the superstar. Jackson was renting this $38 million chateau in the exclusive neighborhood of Holmby Hills in Los Angeles, and it was just beyond these gates that the singer took his last breath. We know that he was getting ready for a 50-concert comeback tour in London. And we do know that June 25th did start routinely enough. Around 1 o'clock a.m. Thursday, June 25th, Michael Jackson returned to his estate after 6 hours of intense rehearsals. By most accounts, the King of Pop had been animated and in good spirits during rehearsals. But he'd also reportedly called his manager and complained he was not feeling well. That was the only hint at what would unfold over the next several hours.
No one at that rehearsal had a sense that what was going to happen a few hours later, that Michael Jackson would be in full cardiac arrest.
Law enforcement officials say that Jackson went to bed in his personal physician's room, where later an IV stand and oxygen tanks were found.
I had seen the oxygen tanks, you know, sometimes Dr. Murray would bring them down.
About a month earlier, Dr. Conrad Murray had signed on to monitor the pop star for his upcoming tour. The Houston and Vegas-based doctor who left his practice to work for Michael asked for $1 million a month, but was negotiated down to $150,000. AEG, the tour promoter, stated that Jackson insisted on hiring Murray.
Michael needed a physician, wanted a physician. He trusted Dr. Murray. He hired Dr. Murray to go with him to London.
Jackson suffered from insomnia and had a long history with prescription drugs, believed to date back to the 80s after he suffered a painful accident. While shooting a Pepsi commercial, the pyrotechnics were set off too early.
Michael has suffered second and third degree burns, and so he was prescribed very strong painkillers. After this, he was pretty much addicted to drugs on and off for the rest of his life.
According to the coroner's report, a lethal combination of meds along with propofol would ultimately take the singer's life. So just what happened on that tragic day? According to the search warrant, Dr. Murray gave Jackson a 10-milligram Valium to sedate him at 1:30 a.m. 30 minutes later, the pop star was still awake. Murray administered another sedative, lorazepam, through an IV. At 3 o'clock a.m., Jackson remained unable to sleep. Dr. Murray then gave him a drug called midazolam.
Midazolam is used either an adjunct to anesthesia or to sedate somebody in some kind of critical care setting.
At 5 a.m., Murray administered more lorazepam. And at 7:30 a.m., another dose of midazolam.
The fact that you see multiple members of the same family of medicines, you know, makes you wonder, were these people truly familiar with the use of these medications?
Jackson remained awake, and according to Dr. Murray, repeatedly requested the powerful anesthetic drug propofol.
My thoughts on using propofol
recreationally or using propofol outside of a hospital is you're crazy.
Finally, at 10:40 a.m., Dr. Murray agreed to Jackson's request and gave him 25 milligrams of propofol with lidocaine, another anesthetic drug, through an IV drip.
It's looking more like an anesthetic setting rather than just trying to sedate somebody.
According to the LAPD, Dr. Murray says he was constantly at Jackson's bedside, but around 10:50 a.m., Murray left Jackson alone. He would return just minutes later to find his patient not breathing. So where did Dr. Murray go? According to reports, he just stepped out to use the restroom, but those 10 minutes turned out to be absolutely critical. It was approximately 11 a.m. when Dr. Murray returned to Jackson's bedside. In a statement, Dr. Murray says he was gone for a maximum of 2 minutes. However long, the doctor came back to find his patient comatose.
There needs to be someone there at all times monitoring the anesthetic and correcting problems as they occur.
According to authorities, it took a full hour and 21 minutes before 911 was called. Meanwhile, downstairs, Kai Chase, Michael's personal chef, noticed that something was not right.
Around 10:30, normally Dr. Murray usually comes downstairs to get some juice, the fresh and organic juices that I make for Mr. Jackson, and take them upstairs, but on this day I didn't see that at that time.
Upstairs, attempts to save the singer's life started to unfold. Dr. Murray performed CPR and administered 0.2 milligrams of flumezanol, an antidote to the drugs that were in Jackson's system. According to the search warrant, during this time, Dr. Murray made a series of phone calls, starting at 11:18 a.m. with a 32-minute call to his office in Las Vegas, another call to Vegas at 11:49 a.m. for 3 minutes. Then at 11:51 a.m., he called a Houston number for 11 minutes. Reportedly at 12:12 p.m., he dialed an unknown Jackson associate for 1 minute, and then Jackson's personal assistant, Michael Amir Williams, at 12:13 p.m. with a 4-second plea for help. Downstairs, Kai began to prepare lunch, but was soon interrupted.
Then I see Dr. Murray. He comes down the stairs and he starts screaming frantically, "Hurry, go get Prince, get security."
Coming up, the call heard around the world.
He's not breathing yet. He's not breathing, and we're trying to pump him.
We'll bring you a vivid description from the responding fire captain.
And obviously their emotions heighten when they know the celebrity of the patient, and that makes it a little bit more intense.
And did the paparazzi go too far?
Those guys were all over that ambulance. It was crazy.
But next, a minute-by-minute account of the dramatic events surrounding Jackson in the days leading up to his death.
I spoke with him, and he looked very thin. You could just see, he was working hard, and he looked like he was tired.
Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to TV Guide Network's in-depth look at Michael Jackson's final days. I'm Veronica Dela Cruz. It was a tremendously busy time for the King of Pop. He was in rehearsals for a comeback tour that involved a mind-boggling 50-concert gig in London. And with his departure for the other side of the pond just days away, his schedule that final week was jam-packed. So let's take you back to Monday, June 22nd, when Jackson awoke uncharacteristically early to come here, the Beverly Hills office belonging to his longtime dermatologist and confidant, Dr. Arnold Klein. 9 a.m. Michael Jackson left his rented mansion in the very ritzy LA neighborhood of Holmby Hills for an appointment at Dr. Klein's Beverly Hills office just 2 miles away, an appointment that was unusually early for a reason.
And he left early in order to avoid paparazzi and a lot of the fans that were always there outside of his house.
Michael was going to the dermatologist, Dr. Klein, 2 and 3 times a week at least, maybe more. We don't know what he was doing with Dr. Klein. But we do know that he was seeing him all the time, which would have been unnecessary for dermatological problems.
Widespread reports suggested Jackson was hooked on all kinds of pain medication and other powerful prescription drugs, including propofol, an anesthetic that's only supposed to be given in a hospital setting. Even so, Dr. Klein insists his patient was just fine that Monday morning.
He was a very good physical condition. He was dancing for my patients. He was very mentally aware when we saw him. And he was in a very good mood because very happy.
After visiting Dr. Klein's office, Jackson is said to have headed home.
He's a great father. you know, takes care of his kids very well.
And 12:30 p.m. was typically reserved for Paris, Prince Michael, and Blanket.
He'd come down and have lunch with his children.
2 p.m., Travis Payne, choreographer for the superstar's upcoming comeback tour, came over to discuss the show.
On Monday, we started the day like we always did. We would review what was coming for the evening's rehearsal.
Later in the day, Michael headed to Staples Center for a full rehearsal.
Monday, specifically, we worked on the big numbers where he was to be in unison with the dancers. And those would be Jam and Smooth Criminal, his classics, Dangerous, Thriller. And he really wanted to be as good as he could be with all of these new, 20 to 30-year-old dancers. And he was doing a great job.
9 p.m., typically the time Dr. Conrad Murray arrived at Holmby Hills. He is, of course, the cardiologist hired as the singer's live-in physician.
Dr. Murray was on the property at least 5 nights a week. He was there all night to monitor Mr. Jackson.
Also by 9 p.m., Chef Kai Chase had to have dinner ready to go.
I was supposed to prepare the meals for Mr. Jackson and Dr. Murray. When Mr. Jackson gets there, he'd heat up his food for him.
By all accounts, Jackson had a punishing rehearsal schedule, and that Monday night he didn't get home until well after midnight. Maybe that's what had prompted a disturbing conversation between him and Kai Chase, most probably on that Monday.
I spoke with him, and he looked very thin, and he had told me, he pulled me to the side, he said, I'm happy that you're here. I need you to keep me healthy because they're killing me. I'm really working a lot. I'm rehearsing a lot. And you could see that. He was working hard, and he looked like he was tired.
And with a massive 50 concert tour just about 3 weeks away, Jackson's days were only going to get busier.
Hold for applause, fade out. In the history of our nation.
With his last week pretty much dominated by preparations for the London tour, Tuesday, June 23rd began routinely enough. Around 8 a.m., Chef Kai Chase arrived at the Jackson home in Holmby Hills.
I start preparing the breakfast for the children, granola and almond milk.
Approximately 10 a.m., breakfast time for Michael Jackson.
Dr. Murray usually comes downstairs to get some juice, the fresh and organic juices that I make for Mr. Jackson. I was never allowed to go upstairs, it was part of the house rules.
He had bedrooms that were very messy. A lot of the upstairs rooms were very hot. He would get very cold, so they had the gas fireplace and the heat turned all the way up.
After sending up Jackson's breakfast, Kai would have gotten busy with lunch that the singer and his children normally ate around 12:30 p.m.
My job was to have the food ready by that time.
2 p.m., Jackson had another session at home with choreographer Travis Payne.
It was a definite feeling of, sort of achievement by that time. We were very excited. We only had a few more rehearsals to go before departing for the O2 in these 50 shows.
In fact, Jackson, who had told Chef Kai Chase that Tuesday that he was packed and ready to go and was scheduled to leave for London in just 10 days on July 3rd. The Tuesday, June 23rd rehearsal at the Staples Center also apparently lasted until midnight and went particularly well.
He just had a lot of vigor. I was on stage at the time, as I would often do, stand in for him, warm the band up, I'd warm the dancers up. Michael walks right out onto the stage, and he just sort of fell into place. And that ultimately was the clip that the world is now seeing of They Don't Care About Us.
Orianthi is the guitarist you see jamming with Jackson.
MJ jumped up on the stage, and he was full of energy, and we just went through everything, and always watching MJ, Michael, to make sure that, where he was going, especially when I was doing my guitar parts, that I sort of followed him.
For a guy who invented the iconic moonwalk, this new tour was a chance to show off some brand new moves.
Michael was the best improvisational dancer that I'd worked with. There were definitely new moves in store for This Is It. It was a culmination of the classic quintessential Michael Jackson, as well as new elements that reflected where we are today as a humanity.
It would have been, which is the tragedy here, one of the most amazing arena shows ever.
Coming up next, a heart-wrenching story from someone who was with Jackson the night before he died.
The last thing Michael Jackson said to me was, I love you.
He feverishly feverishly rehearsed here at the Staples Center in downtown Los Angeles. The day was Wednesday, June 24th, just one day before the singer's shocking death. It would also be the last time the singer would ever take the stage.
Michael's last full day had started much as the days before had. Reportedly, he had breakfast around 10:30 and then lunch with the children.
Lunches was around 12:30. He'd come down and have lunch with his children, then get dressed, to go to rehearsal.
At 2:00 p.m., choreographer Travis Payne arrived to the home for rehearsal, and then Jackson headed to the Staples Center. When he arrived, he started his night going over some new visual elements for his final tour.
We would be looking at special graphics that were being used in films that we had, captured for use in the tour.
As Michael always was, he was very hands-on. I like that shot. Do you think you can do this?
Afterwards, he had a meeting with Ken Ehrlich in his dressing room.
Michael and I had been talking about doing a Halloween special, a show that he wanted to do.
There was this thing called Ghost that he had invested his own millions. It was a short feature film.
A project Travis and Michael had worked on back in 1997.
We mentioned at the residence that it was happening and that, he'd finally now be able to, celebrate Thriller in the way he'd always liked to. And I think that was what was being prepared for, a Thriller/Ghosts special.
After the meetings were over, he took a dinner break.
Kenny Ortega, who was directing his show, have to cut up the chicken and broccoli for him to make sure he ate.
About 9 p.m., the rehearsal began.
Wednesday's actual rehearsal was great. I mean, for the first time, we all sort of had a sense of relief. We saw Michael on stage. He was great. He went through most of the show. He was just in great spirits. He knew that it had come together.
And even though it seemed to still be a work in progress, his spirit was high.
He was in a really happy mood and singing and dancing and just had lots of energy.
And they left that night with a positive feeling about the tour.
Wednesday night at 12:30 a.m. when we all left Staples Center, he gave me a hug and whispered into my ear, "Now I know I can do this." He was that engaged and that incredible.
The last thing Michael Jackson said to me was, "I love you. See you at 2 o'clock." There was no shortage of "I love yous" and "I'm so grateful" and "I appreciate you," and that was very much the type of person he was.
Sadly, Travis would not get to see his friend again. Coming up next, the media spectacle seen outside the gates of Jackson's home.
The photographer that was on site called me around 12:30 and said an ambulance just went into the house. I got there about 10 minutes later, so about 12:40, and I called in 3 other photographers.
And later, a chilling account of what went on in the emergency room.
It was pandemonium, and the doctors were moving very quickly in and out.
When Michael Jackson, The Final Days, returns. Welcome back to TV Guide Network's in-depth look at the last days of the King of Pop. On Thursday, June 25th, shortly after noon, things seemed pretty quiet on this serene street in the Holmby Hills area of Los Angeles, California. But beyond these gates, a radically different story, as frantic attempts were being made to revive an unconscious Michael Jackson. It's those few words that set in motion a chain of events that would shock the world. Just 12 hours before that 911 call was made, Michael Jackson had finished rehearsals at the Staples Center around 1 a.m. Thursday.
Well, the rehearsal was pretty amazing. He was in great shape.
He was in a really happy mood and singing and dancing and just had lots of energy.
From those accounts, no one could have ever imagined that Michael had just hours left to live. We have an exclusive first-hand account of exactly what went on inside the Jackson home that fateful morning. As Jackson's personal chef, Kai Chase, told us, Dr. Murray came running downstairs around 12:05 p.m. on Thursday.
He comes down the stairs and he starts screaming frantically, "Hurry, go get Prince. Get security." So at that point, I drop everything and run into the den, which is not too far from the kitchen, and proceed to go get Prince. And Dr. Murray runs back upstairs. So at this point, me and the children are downstairs, and you can kind of feel that there was something very not right going on.
It's been reported that Dr. Murray found Michael barely breathing and tried to resuscitate him for 30 minutes before a call for help was made.
It's hard to understand why the Dr. Murray didn't call 911 right away, or why somebody in the house didn't.
At 12:21 p.m., a call to 911 was finally made by an unidentified male at Jackson's rented Holmby Hills mansion. We have since learned that the caller was Alberto Alvarez, who worked for Michael.
We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing yet. He's not breathing, and we're trying to pump him, but he's not. Okay.
All right. Do you have him? Is he on the floor? Where's he at right now?
He's on the bed, sir. He's on the bed.
Okay, let's get him on the floor.
Okay.
Okay, let's get him down to the floor. I'm going to help you with CPR right now, okay?
That's the importance of having a professional firefighter as a dispatcher. He asked about where was the CPR being done, and they said it was on the bed. Well, it was our firefighter paramedic dispatcher that said remove the patient from the bed onto the floor. So you can see before paramedics even arrived on scene, life-saving techniques were being implemented.
We're already on our way. Did anybody see him?
Yes, we have a personal doctor here with him, sir.
Oh, you have a doctor there?
Yes, but he's not responding to anything. No, he's not responding to CPR or anything.
They go through a series of protocol questions so that the dispatcher can get as much information as possible to relay to the rescue ambulances.
Did anybody witness what happened?
No, just the doctor, sir. The doctor's been the only one here.
Okay, so the doctor see what happened?
Doctor, did you see what happened, sir? Sir, you just, if you can please.
We're on our way. I'm just passing these questions on to my paramedics while they're on the way there, sir.
Thank you, sir. He's pumping his chest, but he's not responding to anything, sir. Please.
Fire Station 71 in Bel Air moved into immediate action. The station, located less than a mile away from the Jackson house, traveled down Sunset Boulevard. It took them only 3 minutes and 17 seconds to get to the house, arriving at 12:24 p.m. The station dispatched an advanced emergency medical team of 4 certified paramedics plus 6 firefighters.
At the scene, you had 4 paramedics, which would have been a normal assignment for someone suffering the same thing as Mr. Jackson was suffering. This was nothing out of the ordinary because he was a celebrity.
All of a sudden, we see paramedics, running up the stairs. We start panicking. Harris starts crying, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." I start crying, the staff starts crying, and then we just kind of came together and we just start praying.
The paramedics were fully equipped with all the advanced life support systems, including a defibrillator. But what they weren't ready for was the fact that their patient was a huge celebrity. The paramedics didn't know it was Michael Jackson until they entered the home.
And obviously their emotions heighten when they know the patient or they know the celebrity of the patient. And that makes it a little bit more intense. And they know that they just refer back to their training.
Paramedics spent around 42 minutes at Jackson's house trying to revive him.
The reason for that delay is that firefighters are in communication with the emergency hospitals, and they're doing everything possible to stabilize the patient using the tools and equipment that we have.
According to law enforcement officials, the upstairs of the mansion was a complete mess. In Michael Jackson's room, there were clothes and papers all over the place. And the word is, no one from the staff was allowed in his room.
A photo of Michael's deathbed was released by British paper News of the World, taken a day after Michael died. The picture shows a bedroom with an air pumping device and other medical equipment. That picture is reportedly the room where paramedics found Michael. And while they began working on him, the paparazzi began forming outside the mansion. Ben Evanstad's agency, National Photo Group, was already at the house when the ambulance arrived because his photogs had been staking out Jackson's place every day.
The first indication we had that something was going on is the photographer that was on site called me around 12:30 and said an ambulance just went into the house. I got there about 10 minutes later, so about 12:40, and I called in 3 other photographers.
Paramedics spent over 40 minutes at the house until the decision came to transport Michael to UCLA for further treatment.
It was necessary for us to stay there for that amount of time to stabilize him. The hospital said, there's not more we can do in the field. Let's package Mr. Jackson and get him to the short drive to UCLA.
It was 1:06 p.m. when the ambulance pulled out of the Jackson home. They encountered masses of paparazzi waiting outside the gate.
The driver of the ambulance told me personally that as they were pulling out the street, paparazzi were running and putting their cameras up against the windows and snapping pictures.
As the paparazzi chased the ambulance up the street, a photographer pressed up against this window to get the last photo to show Michael's face.
Taking a flash picture through a window that has tint is difficult to do. You have to get the lens right up against the window and the flash right up against the window, so it can be a bit of a trick.
And Starline Tours, which has been giving tours of stars' homes for over 70 years, happened to be at the house at the exact same time the ambulance was pulling out of the gate. Lisa Staub was driving the bus that day when she saw the dramatic scene outside the Jackson home.
It was just a normal tour. tour. Nothing different until we approached the front entrance of the rental property of Michael Jackson. We saw a fire engine parked, like guarding the front entrance, the gate, and all of a sudden an EMT or firefighter came out and told us to stop. And it was the ambulance. It was leaving the front gates, and we had no idea who was in it, I'll be honest, but we were like, oh my gosh. And so at that moment we just stopped, we watched. The only thing that was being yelled, and I can't be certain if it was the security guard, they was like, hey man, he's not breathing, move out of the way. He's not breathing. We watched paparazzi jump all over the vehicle. Those guys were all over that ambulance. It was crazy. And then all of a sudden the ambulance took off, and as soon as they did, there was 3 or 4 paparazzi cars that just took off after the ambulance.
And the drama doesn't end there. What's about to come next will put Michael's family, friends, and fans from around the world in a state of shock and sadness. Still ahead, the mad rush to UCLA Medical Center. But was it already too late to save the King of Pop, while the Jackson family scrambles to get to Michael's bedside?
I saw the family in their rooms. There were hugs, there were tears.
We have a gentleman here that needs help, and he's not breathing.
At 12:21 p.m., 911 received that phone call, and a quick 3 minutes later, paramedics arrived at Michael Jackson's home.
They're in the back of the ambulance. They are administering the medical care. They're monitoring his breathing. They don't break communication with the hospital.
At 1:14 p.m., the ambulance carrying Michael Jackson arrived at UCLA Medical Center.
They are, quickly moving into the emergency room, and they are giving a brief to the doctors on what they saw, what they felt, what they experienced.
The usually covered Michael was brought to the hospital barely dressed.
I heard that he was wearing is a pair of kind of black, shiny sort of tuxedo trousers, and that he wasn't wearing a shirt. It's my understanding that he didn't have the front of his nose and that he had to wear a prosthetic.
They brought him in on the stretcher and they put him into the emergency room. I was sitting in a chair right outside the actual room, and there was tons of activity, and they were trying to resuscitate him and save him.
The ER doctors worked on Michael for about an hour, unable to revive him. Michael was pronounced dead at 2:26 p.m. Thursday, June 25th. From what we now know was a lethal dose of propofol and a combination of other medications.
A nurse came out of the emergency room and told Randy Phillips and Frank DeLeo, who were sitting right there, that Jackson was dead.
Brian Oxman, the Jackson family spokesman, got to the hospital at about 2:30, just as some of the family members were starting to arrive.
I was there for a few minutes, and Randy Jackson walked in, and I went up to him and I just put my arms around him, and we started to sob together. And then Jermaine Jackson came through the door. He put his arms around me, and we stood again sobbing in the middle of the emergency room.
Finally, Catherine Jackson arrived at the hospital.
I saw the family in their room. They were holding hands. They weren't speaking. They were very upset. There were hugs. There were tears.
But there wasn't just family at the hospital. Brian noticed Dr. Murray in the corner.
He was absolutely glassy-eyed. He had no expression on his face. He was nervous and upset, and pretty soon he disappeared outside the door.
And outside, fans were already starting to gather, and their presence was felt inside the emergency room.
In the middle of trying to revive Michael, trying to save Michael, his music was playing from the fans, and it was so loud, and it filtered into the emergency room. Just a very unreal circumstance.
When we come back, an anxious crowd joins the world in anticipation for the official news.
A team of doctors attempted to resuscitate him, and they were unsuccessful.
And across town, Michael's dancers and musicians received the devastating news.
It was just silence, and I think everybody was in shock.
I'm Veronica Dela Cruz. Welcome back to TV Guide Network's special investigation of Michael Jackson, The Final Days. June 25th, 2009, as Los Angeles paramedics deliver an unconscious Michael Jackson here to UCLA Medical Center. A mass of bewildered fans congregate outside as the day's most shocking news was revealed.
After paramedics stabilized Michael at his home, he was then transported to UCLA Medical Center, arriving at 1:14 p.m. Fans immediately began to gather on the lawn outside.
I rushed straight to UCLA when I found out. At first, I was a little hysterical.
And everyone was like chanting his name.
And I just wanted to be here to share with the fans.
Hundreds of fans started gathering and playing Michael Jackson music, both in shock and crying. The media outside just trying to get answers.
Though officials weren't feeding the media any information, at 1:30 Pacific time, the online gossip site TMZ posted that Jackson had suffered cardiac arrest. Even more peculiar, at 2:20 p.m., TMZ reported Michael Jackson had died a full 6 minutes before the hospital officially pronounced him dead.
You had one outlet saying he was dead, another outlet saying he was in a coma. There was confusion about what really happened.
Around 4 p.m., the media flurry became a full-fledged storm as the official news was announced.
CNN can now confirm from the LA coroner that Michael Jackson is dead.
Details are still coming in about the sudden death of Michael Jackson.
The music superstar died suddenly of cardiac arrest. He was 50.
Shortly thereafter, fans' hope turned to mourning as brother Jermaine Jackson confirmed the worst.
A team of doctors, including emergency physicians and cardiologists, attempted to resuscitate him for a period of more than 1 hour, and they were unsuccessful. May Allah be with you, Michael, always. Love you.
As the crowd grew and grew outside of UCLA Medical Center, 14 miles downtown at Staples Center, performers from Jackson's This Is It tour were rehearsing.
We're watching this on TV at rehearsal, so it's like, we're kind of like, what's going on?
We started to just have phones going off everywhere. And so everybody was remaining calm, you know, because we had not gotten any definitiveness.
We're getting ready to go. I thought it wasn't for real.
But then Randy called, you know, Randy from AEG. And once he called, we figured, okay, well, this is real. It was just silence. We all sort of huddled together as a family.
Forget the job aspect. Forget that. It had nothing to do with that. It was, we lost. That was like losing an uncle. That was like losing your brother. That was more than just an employer we lost. That was family.
So he was really an amazing person. And it hurts me when I hear people say bad things about him. If anyone knew him, they would understand that he's really just truly a blessing for us all.
That 3 months of rehearsal with him every day and getting a chance to establish a relationship with him on the side, man, that was everything.
Yep.
Michael has left us all with the tools to make differences in the way we live. It's up to all of humanity to, you know, to take those messages and do something with them now, because we have time and we can. Yes, we can.
Still to come, the unimaginable task of telling Michael's 3 children their father was gone.
They were very upset.
Plus, a world in shock as the devastating news travels the globe. We'll be right back.
Madison Michelle, and today's Hollywood Minute features the highly anticipated Saw 6.
Healthcare decisions should be made by doctors and their patients, not by the insurance companies.
Just when you thought we saw the last of him, Jigsaw is back. And yep, you guessed it, he wants to play a game.
6 ride the carousel, but only 2 can get off. To offer the 2 reprieves, you'll give a sacrifice of your own.
Peter Outerbridge is Will, and he's left with the daunting task of choosing life or death for 6 of his most valuable associates.
Two kids? No, but Will, please. I'm pregnant.
No, she's not. She's lying.
My parents are sick. Okay, they need me. I'm all they have. Please.
Your parents hate you. They cut you off.
So, who will be spared? You'll find out soon. Saw 6 is in theaters Friday.
Welcome back. June 25th, 2009, the King of Pop confirmed dead at the age of 50. Though he only occupied this home in the Holmby Hills for a short amount of time, it will forever be remembered as the place Michael Jackson took his last breath. And for his children who are with him, it will be the last place they ever saw their father alive.
For the past several months, this beautiful chateau on 100 North Carrollwood Drive is where Jackson and his 3 children called home. And according to Kai Chase, who worked at the home, it was a very happy one.
Mr. Jackson plays music throughout the house, and then in the evenings, he'd come home from rehearsal and he'd have dinner with his children. He's a great father.
But sadly, all those wonderful times would quickly come to an end. On Thursday, June 25th, around 1:06 p.m., paramedics rushed Michael to UCLA Medical Center. Soon after, the kids were taken to the hospital, where they were told by Michael's manager, Frank DeLeo, that their father had passed away.
At that point, Catherine Jackson, she hadn't arrived at the hospital yet, so Frank DeLeo had to go in to the room where the kids were waiting, and he had to tell them the news.
After learning the news, the children wanted to see their father one last time.
Latoya has said that she took the children into the area where Michael was and that they saw their father.
The hospital would officially pronounce Michael dead at 2:26 p.m. and quickly fans began mobilizing all over Los Angeles. From UCLA Medical Center to Michael's star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame to Catherine Jackson's home in Encino, California, fans gathered to pay tribute to the King of Pop.
I don't think it was his time to go.
As Los Angeles publicly mourned, so did the rest of the country and also around the world, from Europe to Asia. And on that tragic and shocking Thursday, June 25th, the last image fans would see of their fallen star, Michael's body airlifted from UCLA to the coroner's office. It's a visual reminder of a life cut short and a musical giant silenced before he could make his great comeback.
This is it. I mean, this is really it. This is the final curtain call.
As the investigation into Michael Jackson's tragic death continues to take twists and turns, there's one thing we know for certain. Michael Jackson's unparalleled musical legacy will live on forever. Thanks so much for joining us for this special presentation of TV Guide Network's The Final Days of Michael Jackson.
All I want to say is that they don't really care about us.
Hold for applause, fade out.